So today I want to share something that it might not be anything directly related to Oneida County news, but it's something that is happening in many different states. And usually, if it starts in one state, it can move to other states, and that is food safety. Um, that's what I want to talk about today. Food safety is very important, and really, it goes beyond that to what what control do I have over myself, over my body, over what I can do with my body, with my property, how I can interact with other people, and what is the role of government? Should the government be able to control anything that I do and any interaction that I have with other people? Is the government here to protect my rights and the rights of others, or is it here to be a nanny state and a big brother to prevent me from interacting with other people just in case there's a bad interaction? Do we believe in pre-crime to prevent people from doing what they want to just in case they might do something that'll hurt someone else? If that's the case, why are we allowed to drive? Why are we allowed to speak to other people? Because what we say, we might make other people upset. Oh, wait, that's hate crime. We already have that. There's in Coeur d'Alene, they just introduced hate speech, a hate speech ordinance. And the day after it was introduced, one of the city council performed some hate speech during a parade on the parade watchers. He called them white supremacists. So he is actually being investigated by the FBI because of an ordinance that he himself voted in favor of the day before. The world's going crazy. Anyway, that's a little bit beside the point. I want to talk about food safety today, and I'm going to be commenting on an interview that was done with Amos Miller's lawyer, Robert Barnes. If you're unfamiliar with Amos Miller, he is an Amish farmer in Pennsylvania who has been persecuted and prosecuted by the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. Usually when we think of government overreach, we think of the federal government, but it can be just as bad on the state, in the county, or even in an HOA. So let me bring this forward, and I'll be stopping it every once in a while to put in my 2 cents.
At this point in time, is Miller able to sell anything to his private members?
Oh, so Amos Miller doesn't sell to the public. He has a private membership group that he only sells to. You cannot purchase stuff, or I don't think you can purchase stuff from him unless you are a part of his private consumer group. So that should be another level of protection for him, that only people that want his stuff and join his group can get it. I think that's how it is.
Yes, the injunction was modified so that it only applies to raw milk products. Amos Miller is allowed to sell everything else.
And what is everything else?
Oh, he has everything. So he has beef, he has poultry, he has pork, he has buffalo, he has baked goods. There's other people in the Amish community that are wanting to support him. So there's a rank, like there's soap products and other products like that are also now available. His site is Amos. There's some fake sites out there that claim to be him. His site is AmosMillerOrganicFarm.com. And that's where you can get all of that. And you can see everything that's currently available. He's made some ghee that he's just going to give away because he's allowed to give things away. He's just not allowed to sell any raw milk product.
All right, that brings me to the next question. So a destruction order was issued for Miller's food inventory. Were they successful in forcing him to execute that?
No, we are filing a petition with the court to challenge that. And while that petition is pending, they can't enforce it. And because they ordered destroyed, not only food that was evidently safe and desired, and the food in some cases of people that already paid for it, so it was really their food, not Amos Miller's food, but food they knew was safe. Their own testing had come back and shown the food had no problems, questions, issues of any kind, and yet they're ordering it destroyed. The law in Pennsylvania only allows food to be destroyed that is unfit for human consumption, can't be made fit for human consumption, and has no other beneficial or animal use available. And so the order of destruction is a patently unlawful order that we will be challenging across the.
All right, just as an aside, I was able to pull up his website, and here it is. As a member of our community, you will be able to purchase products that are produced on our Miller's Organic Farm from our local surrounding Amish farmers who practice the same sustainable methods. We strive to raise happy and healthy animals, grow food that is chemical-free, GMO-free, soy-free, antibiotic-free, and hormone-free with traditional, time-honored, but unconventional sustainable methods. Unconventional? They're Amish. I think that, well, nowadays I guess it's unconventional. 100 years ago, it was the convention. It was what everybody did. All of our products are only available to members who belong to our private association and are not available to the public. Our suppliers produce food that are grown how nature intended, and we oppose any forms of hasting that process through unnatural interventions like force feeding, synthetic chemical applications, or cruelty. Your membership grants you to join our association and obtain food that are of highest quality and grown specifically for our members only. So yeah, it's member-specific food. You have to be a member of the community to get his products, and so really, I would say the government shouldn't be involved in that at all. Then, because it's a me selling to you directly. If you don't want it, you don't have to buy it. You specifically know how I'm producing it. So what's the problem? Anyway, let's go on with the interview.
The board.
So he has not had to send anything to mass trash
No.
can, basically.
No.
All right, that's good.
And one problem is that a good amount of it, some of the raw milk products will be spoiled, so that the only use, might be feeding the pigs, but they don't even want to let them do that.
Mm-hmm. So
imagine that. He can't even give his waste products to the pigs. What is the and in some states, raw milk products you cannot consume because they consider it like toxic waste or something along those lines. So you can't give it, you can't consume it yourself. You can't give it to animals. So some people to get around that say it's only a soil amendment. So when a cow has a calf, can the calf drink the milk? I guess according to some states, I think West Virginia, calves shouldn't be able to drink the milk of the cow because it's a toxic product. I've been drinking raw milk since I was a kid. That might be a vote against raw milk, depending on how you think of me, but I think I'm still alive and fairly cogent.
did the destruction order come from the judge or the PDA?
That only came from the PDA. No judge has approved it yet.
All right. And was it put forth on the grounds of infection or just production without a raw milk permit?
They had no the order of PDA itself doesn't reference the food being unfit at any level or unsafe at any level.
Yeah.
It says solely that it was made without a permit.
Okay.
And thus they're calling that mislabeling, which makes no sense at all because first of all, it wasn't even packaged yet. So the packaging laws have no application. And secondly, he's always packaged it correctly. He's never claimed to have a PDA permit. So it's the most preposterous interpretation of that part of the law as well.
Yeah. All right, so you cited in one of your previous interviews that Miller's case could shape the future of food freedom in America. As I have relayed that perspective through my articles and through my videos, I've received a few comments citing that this case does not have the weight necessary to set legal precedents beyond Pennsylvania. How would you respond to those comments?
Unfortunately, those people are mistaken because the authority that PDA is trying to establish would apply across the board, in particular because PDA is claiming they have the authority to regulate food in the entire country. Right?
And that's insane. That's like an inversion of the supremacy clause in the Constitution, which I don't personally agree with the supremacy clause, that each state should be fairly autonomous. But that being said, no state should have any ability to do what they want against other states. Each state is an island, and within that island, as long as they're not interfering with other islands, they should be able to do whatever they want constitutionally and under the law. In my opinion, we have people believe in the supremacy clause, so really the federal government should be able to tell Pennsylvania to knock it off. Hopefully they will in this specific instance.
Right now, this injunction order applies outside of Pennsylvania. It applies to entities. Some of the defendants are not Pennsylvania farms.
Mm-hmm.
It's prohibiting non-Pennsylvania farms from giving food or selling food to people who don't live in Pennsylvania, to where no part of the sale has anything to do with Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
So if Pennsylvania, they said so at the hearing, their goal was to replace the FDA as it related to anything that they wanted to regulate and restrict. So those that believe it won't carry weight outside of Pennsylvania, unfortunately, aren't paying attention to what Pennsylvania is trying to claim here.
So that's because, number one, he's serving customers outside of the state, and number two, he is co-oping with farmers outside of the state. So it's a little bit more encompassing.
Exactly.
That makes sense. All right. So in a podcast with Viva Frey, you cited that the PDA was pushing for such extreme judgments against Miller that the judgments would set precedents to regulate food grown on private property or personal consumption. Was I understanding your statement correctly? Could you explain it a little bit further? Unpack it.
Yeah, this was actually the sworn testimony of the officials from the PDA itself. I asked them, do you believe you have the right to control and decide whether a person purchases food, possesses food, or produces food? Mm-hmm. And they said, yes, no food can be purchased, possessed, or produced without their express permission in advance, or it's, quote, illegal food. Indeed, they want to treat food as illegal as crack cocaine. Apparently, that's how scary Amos Miller's raw milk is. It's more effective than crack, according to the state of Pennsylvania. And that's why I've called the Secretary of Agriculture the Pope of Food, the self-declared Pope of Food. Secretary Redding, until he gives you the blessing, the sacrament, no, you can't even eat it. You can't possess it. You can't purchase it. You can't produce it. This is the scope of power they're trying to claim. It would give them 100% control, complete monopoly over all food in America.
And to relate that back to Malad, when I moved into my house, I did not get the blessing from the building inspector, even though my house was completely livable. And I was given or charged with a misdemeanor for living in my own home without the blessing of the building inspector. Thankfully, it was the case was dismissed, and I didn't have to pay the fine or whatever it was going to be. But I had to receive. I was charged with a misdemeanor for not getting the blessing of the building inspector. Did his blessing make the house automatically livable? Was I in danger for not getting that inspection blessing? Things are backwards in this country, and yeah, I hope for a change.
So Sherry Morris, she was on as a witness, and she said, well, if you want to own your own cow and make your own sour cream, we don't care. But if you want to sell it to anyone else, that's when we do. Was she being duplicitous there? Was there something going on behind the scenes?
Yes, she was being duplicitous because she herself and the PDA had come to Amos and or was already rationing food.
Mm.
They were saying, "Here's how you can have this much for your family. You can do this," and literally rationing. And what it is in front of the judge, when the judge expressed skepticism of that, they're like, "Oh no, we would never do that," when they just done it. So that it's what they're aiming to do is to establish that precedent with this case. The judge pushed back on some aspects of it, so they didn't go all out. But their goal is to ultimately go there because they've already done it.
As I was watching and it was coming to a conclusion, it seemed as if the judge did not understand that under permit, Miller could not offer some of the things that he already does.
That's exactly right. I mean, in fact, that we kept explaining this is the most unusual permit in the world because it's a prohibition. Imagine if you had to get a license to drive to work. And they said so they said you can't go to work until you get your license. So you apply for your license, but the license says you can use this to drive, just not to work. That's basically what's going on here. The permission is a prohibition. He's banned from making almost all raw milk products. Can't make butter, can't make cream, can't make ice cream, can't make colostrum, can't make a whole bunch of things. Yogurt, can't, you name it. Can't make smoothies. All the 95% of the raw milk products that people want, he can't make. And so it's not really a permit, it's a prohibition. And our argument is that's an illegal interpretation of the law and beyond their constitutional authority.
So imagine this. How many people in this country would love to produce something, but because there is so much red tape and so much of this legal bureaucracy that we have to deal with, that it makes them go, I just don't have to, I don't want to have to deal with that. So I'll just go to my 9-to-5 job. I won't enjoy it as much as growing trees, raising chickens, raising sheep, milking cows, growing timber for our lumber yard. There's just so much regulation that it's just easier to be an employee than a producer. The production of this country, of this state, of this community is hampered by the amount of regulation that we have to deal with. And only those that want to have to deal with the red tape, that are willing to deal with the red tape, are going to go forward in that. So that limits the amount of competition between people, and that creates in some places a monopoly because no one else wants to have to deal with it. Things need to change.
That was a point at which I thought there was going to be a breaking point, because he seemed to think all they needed was a permit for hard cheese, liquid milk, etc. Did you have any success behind the scenes budging him with that particular understanding?
He tried to get the state to after he had the public leave. He tried to get the state to fold on that point, to say, shouldn't I only restrain the food that he can actually get a permit for? And they made clear they wouldn't budge at all. And he was like, well, couldn't you agree to this or that? Nope. Until Amos Miller bows and everybody recognizes we run all the food in the world, there's no other solution. And I told the judge the only way would be to take away their temporary injunction. That's the only thing that was going to get them to be reasonable in the negotiation table. But they had no interest in that. Because it's not just Amos. They wanted to take out Amos for a while. Their goal is to set a precedent that they can use against everyone, everywhere.
All right. So you mentioned Nuremberg in the context of Amos Miller's case. What did you mean, and how did you draw the parallels?
The ultimate principle of informed consent being such a critical aspect to our bodily autonomy that it's a universally recognized legal norm, what in the law is sometimes called a jus cogens norm, a norm that's so universal, even if a country or government doesn't have a specific law on it, you can enforce it. That's what Nuremberg was all about. Nuremberg said, yeah, okay, these were German government officials following the law. German judges were famously prosecuted at Nuremberg, hence the film Judgment at Nuremberg, which is all about those judges. And it says, so how could you criminally prosecute and punish people who are actually following the law? Because there's a higher law, a universal international law, a just Kogan's law, that says informed consent. You can't do anything to anyone's body that is not with their informed consent. All of our food laws are informed consent laws. They're all derived to say, when I buy a food item, I know what I'm getting and putting in my body. If I'm buying corn, it's actually corn. It's not green beans.
So, unless I'm mistaken, when the FDA was formed, that was the whole purpose of the FDA, to make sure when you bought a can of corn, it was a can of corn, not a can of beans, mislabeled as a can of corn. And, if the FDA was just making sure that what we got was what we were wanting, I would be more okay with it. I still wouldn't be okay with it because the FDA is not in the Constitution, so we shouldn't have it. But at least we would have something. At least it would be within the bounds that it was originally set. But how many governmental agencies stay within their original bounds? I think 0.
If I'm buying the beef, it's beef that I know I like and is safe. We only needed these laws because big corporations were taking over our food supply at the beginning of the 20th century. Before this, we never needed these laws because we bought it from our local farmer. There were no inspection, regulation laws or any of that. We bought it from a farmer we liked and we trusted. And indeed, federal inspection laws from 1913 through 1967 specifically said none of the inspection or regulations apply when you're buying food directly from the producer of that food. And so the principle of Nuremberg is informed consent, where all of our food laws should be about that. Pennsylvania, half a dozen times, has overturned the state when the state went past that. They said unless the food was adulterated in such a way that it deceived and deprived the consumer of informed consent, then you have no constitutional right to prohibit that food item, no constitutional right to punish a person for making that food item. And that was our point. And here, all the consumers agreed. They wanted Amos Miller's product. There wasn't a single consumer that said, please don't make this available to me. Every single one said, please, please make it available to me. That's the principle at Nuremberg that we're getting away from, whether it's in the medical context or the food context. This is supposed to be about our informed consent, not about governmental control.
Mm-hmm. So what about, I'm just going to play the antagonist here. What if somebody says, well, if you deregulate meat and dairy, you'd have to deregulate drugs sold privately, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's maybe a bit of a fringe argument, but how would you respond to that?
We're only saying that traditional foods that have traditionally been bought by a person directly from the farm are what's constitutionally protected. And even then, as long as you have a compelling state interest and a law narrowly tailored to it, then you can still have a law regulating it. And Pennsylvania has 200 years of history, going back to 1831, with cases on this. And it said, when is it okay to exercise the police power of the state concerning food? When it's dangerous or it's deceptive. Mm-hmm. That's when. But if it's not dangerous, it's not deceptive, it's something that you've traditionally purchased, then it's something that you should have a right to be able to purchase. And you choose what goes into your body, not the government.
And I think that's the perfect standard right there. If it's dangerous or it's deceptive, then the government should step in. But if it's neither of those, if it's exactly what the consumer wants and the producer's producing, then what's the problem? Unless maybe the consumer or the producer is producing poison and the consumer is wanting poison to kill people with, maybe that would be not good. But then again, people can go to the store and pick up weed killer and drink that and kill themselves. So really, I don't know at that point. Can a producer produce something that is dangerous and the consumer buy it and not need the state involved? I think as long as both parties are okay with with what's happening, then I'd probably be fine with it. Yeah. It's not mislabeling, so it should be fine. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So based on what I heard from your outside the courtroom conversation podcast, etc., I expected you to argue more from the standpoint of Miller's private membership or the unconstitutional nature of the search warrant. However, in court, your argument was focused more on the message of harm to the public if the injunction was upheld. Why did you choose to argue from that standpoint?
Well, it was where that judge was. That judge had shown no interest in pursuing the constitutional issues. So the judge made clear that he was really only concerned with public impact.
Mm-hmm.
And in there, and he, to his credit, he did say in the court order that he respected the sincerely held beliefs of all the health benefits of Amos Miller's food, but he felt he was bound by the legislature. We disagree with him about that, but that's where the issue became under traditional equitable jurisdiction. The primary concern of a trial court is supposed to be the impact of the public and substantial harm on other interested parties.
Now that I find interesting, as a little bit of an aside, there's a lot of avenues of attack that Robert Barnes could have gone, but because of the specific beliefs of the judge, he tailored his argument to what would be most compelling to that specific judge. So that's an interesting aside.
Particularly in Pennsylvania. He honestly didn't do an analysis on that. And so that sets up part of our appeal, is that he seemed to think that he had to rubber stamp the state. Mm-hmm. And that's really not our interpretation of the law. And that's where we would disagree with it. But we're preserving all the constitutional issues and raising those on appeal as well.
Gotcha. All right, Sherry Morris was the official at the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture who signed the affidavit of probable cause. She really set this whole situation in motion. The probable cause was based on a customer of Miller's in New York who became sick with E. coli. There was no complaint issued by the individual, and the individual did not want to comment on the case. How would the PDA have obtained this report?
That's still in doubt. So the PDA never produced any of the New York's files. Mm. They never produced any other state's files, and there was a history of the PDA lying about Amos Miller and food. They had claimed many years ago that an elderly lady had died after consuming Amos Miller's product. We researched it and, in fact, got a sworn statement under penalty of perjury, an investigative article from a former Wall Street Journal reporter. And as well, we got the database evidence that showed that they were lying all along, that it was an elderly woman who had fourth stage cancer who died in the hospital from cancer. Her own caregiver said she never drank any of Amos Miller's raw milk or any other Amos Miller product. And it turned out that the listeria diagnosis was something that had come 6 months before. So it had nothing to do with her hospitalization, and it could have had nothing to do with Amos Miller. So they'd been lying about it for basically 6 years. So we suspected they were doing the same when it came to New York. They came in and sampled all of his food products, sampled his water supply, sampled his environmental sample. We went and did our own samples of everything, and they found no E. coli at all. So they knew that was false. They hid that information from the court. They knew there was no E. coli as of January 6th, yet 18 days later, they were withholding that information from the judge when demanding an emergency ex parte injunction. And it fits. I mean, basically, anytime a state of Pennsylvania official is testifying under oath in this case, it's 100% out of 100% that they're committing perjury and lying about something.
So I don't understand people that are untruthful. My impression, or the way I can kind of justify what they're doing is, it's for the greater good, because it's potentially dangerous. We need to lie because there's got to be truth here somewhere. We just haven't found it yet. There's no way that people drinking raw milk can be safe. It's got to be dangerous, even though we've never found any proof of it being dangerous. We believe, and because we believe, it must be. And because of that, well, we'll just have to stretch the truth a little bit so that we can get what we need to put away this dangerous Amish farmer who's trying to kill these people with his food that must be bad, even though we haven't found any proof of it being bad yet. But there was this one lady who might have consumed something closely related, and she had cancer, but it's bad. So we'll stretch the truth enough that we can get what we want, because we have the power. We are right. We are government. So we need to protect all those people, those stupid people that just don't know that we're right. Even though there's no proof that we're right, we are, because we are from the government. So let's just stretch the truth a little bit and put this guy down and make precedent so that we can help everybody else that's too stupid to know what's right. We'll just push them toward the factory farms that have a really poor track record of safety in the long run. And Amos Miller has had a perfect track record of safety, but he doesn't have the blessing of the government, so he is in the wrong, I guess. Those permits, they are magical things.
They did the same thing lying on the stand at the hearing.
So the whole basis of this hearing on their end was a case from 2016, and then that most recent case from New York. The case from 2016 was the elderly woman who died of cancer?
Correct.
Wow.
Who we got their database that they've been trying to keep secret. It's a database. Most people don't know this exists. There's a database that whenever you get sick and they consider it a food illness, they're taking your test results and putting it in a database and sharing it with all the other government agencies. I don't remember consenting to that whenever I went to the hospital, but so much for privacy and medical autonomy. But so they went and tested, and they've been doing this for years with Amos Miller's products, and they were hoping they could finally get a cross check over 6 years, and they thought they had one, and then it turned out they didn't. So it's just a classic. They don't even know how to interpret those test results. The best expert who testified at the hearing testified on our side. Their so-called expert, has a 1980s view of raw milk. The judge kind of had a similar view, quite frankly. Clearly he had never had unpasteurized milk in his life, because anyone who's had unpasteurized milk and pasteurized milk will never sit there and say to themselves, "I can't wait to have another glass of pasteurized milk." What the hearing was supposed to be about was Amos Miller's products fit for human consumption, because it was so clear that it was so safe. Arguably one of the best safety records in the history of America, at least Pennsylvania, as a farmer. Millions of products produced, tens of thousands of Americans, zero customers have ever filed a complaint, as Pennsylvania's own officials had to admit on the stand. They did so begrudgingly. They tried to say they only knew this part or that part of the file, another part of the file, but ultimately they had to concede that. And that's why instead they had to admit, oh, we're just here because we think he should have to have a permit before he's allowed to give his food to anybody.
So in terms of food safety and, what is a percentage standard as far as disease in just a mainstream dairy? It's there.
Yeah, what's extraordinary here was that, unlike every other major food processor in the state of Pennsylvania, unlike every other major farm in the state of Pennsylvania, Amos Miller's never had any food recalled. Amos Miller's never had anyone complain about his food. And yet he's the one they're going after. I mean, in the 6 weeks that this case has been pending, they have had dozens of food recalls in Pennsylvania. They haven't ordered any of them to stop producing food. They haven't had search warrants on any of them. I mean, here they're trying to apply this sort of microscopic approach to Amos. Is there one person in 10 years that has a complaint? Let's shut them down. Well, the big corporate producers that they protect are having food recalls every other week. So it shows the absurdity of the whole situation.
And the only difference between Amos Miller and those mainstream food producers are they've complied. The mainstream food producers have permits, have everything, etc.
Exactly. And they're willing to not produce all the things that Amos Miller's
Right.
members need.
So what's the permit for? What's the government for? It's, in my opinion, and traditionally I think the role of government was to protect the rights of the individual and to protect the individual, really. But when the permits and the regulations start protecting the big producers and the big businesses and only harm the small businesses, then I think we've gone into some type of beyond the looking glass, Alice in Wonderland type of a situation where it's completely flipped. There is no protection for the little guy anymore. It's just protecting the big interests, the big lobbyists that can feed the coffers of the legislatures, of the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, the Federal Department of Agriculture, the Idaho Department of Agriculture. Every department or every governmental organization, I'm sure, can gain funding from certain locations that benefit big business and harm the little guy. And it's not right.
So they're willing to not produce unpasteurized butter and cream and ice cream and colostrum and all the rest that is essential to the health benefits, as multiple people testified. They depend on it. Their kids depend on it. Their loved ones depend on it. And it's the only place they had found a product that actually worked for their medical necessity. And so that's what's extraordinary. All the food safety evidence was on Amos Miller's side in that case.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to loop back to that affidavit of probable cause. It was so fragile. The basis for it was so fragile. How is there any accountability within the system that would say, no, that's not grounds, that's not basis?
The members are going to pursue a civil rights claim and will raise the perjury they committed in the affidavit, the unlawful search that was produced from it, because there was other people's products being stored at Amos's farm. There's packages that other people had already bought that was simply being stored there. That means they have a cognizable property and privacy interest under the Constitution that they can enforce. What the other reason they like to pick on Amos is because he's Amish, they don't believe in suing. So they thought they could get away with it for that reason. And what they didn't realize is there's other people whose constitutional interest they were violating. And so it was a joke of an affidavit. An honest judge wouldn't have signed it, but that's a lazy magistrate in Pennsylvania. And you saw what those courts are like. Pennsylvania courts seem to think the Star Chamber is the standard. These secretive proceedings, no broadcasting, no publishing, don't take notes or we're throwing you in jail. Like the cops were running around telling people. That's not appropriate. That's not consistent with the requirement of open courts or the First Amendment, but it shows how systemic the problems are in Pennsylvania.
That they did not seat me initially in the media center, but when I was just in the standard rows, we were being watched. We were not permitted to take notes, and some people had begun to take notes, and on break, the sheriffs came up to us and said, you've got to turn those in. You cannot take those out of the courtroom. I personally wondered, is that normal? Is it just a Pennsylvania thing?
It's patently illegal is what it is. And there was the state rule, the Pennsylvania court rule is only no publishing, broadcasting, or recording. It can't apply to taking written note. And there's a constitutional requirement in Pennsylvania that they have open courts. Our court proceedings used to be outdoors for this reason. The idea that they can not only block you from publicizing it, broadcasting it, live streaming it, but that they can go so far as to prohibit you from taking notes of the proceedings is really absurd. And the reason is this. I heard later from prominent people in Pennsylvania politics who told me that's been systemic now for years in Pennsylvania courts, that the reason they do it is they want the institutional media and the court reporter to be the only one to say they have notes so they can control public display. Think about it, people that got to watch that live. A lot of people would have been shocked that all the safety evidence was coming in on behalf of live testimony from real consumers, all in Amos Miller's favor. And to see all those low IQ presenting the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture and asking yourself, do I want this person dictating my health, dictating my diet? I mean, these people are all dying before the rest of us are. Nobody. And then the way they lie, and they lie about crazy things. They do a search warrant raid on his property, and because the Amish are shocked and drop things, they say, "Oh, things must be always on the ground." Da, da, da. They know that's hogwash. So they know they would have been exposed, and that's what the Pennsylvania courts are hiding. We're also looking at constitutionally challenging that as well.
There was a stack presented by, it was the first witness put up by the PDA. It was a very thick stack of photos. Is that kind of detail permissible in a search warrant the type of search warrant that they obtained?
And locked everybody out. And that meant that nobody could observe what they're doing, what they're moving, what they're locating, how they're testing, how they're sampling, all the rest. They lied about it on the stand, which was amazing. It's like every time a PDA witness got up there, it's like, okay, what's going to be the new line of perjury? What they forgot is the sheriffs had new body cam systems they put in 6 months before that they were wearing with them at that location. We're going to be getting that body cam, and it's going to prove even more perjury. The second part is you have to ask yourself, why didn't they just use a camera? Why didn't they allow observers? And why didn't they use a camera? They went nuts when a media member tried to put a camera and come in there, said, get out of here. Why was that? Why did they just have photos rather than video footage if that was their goal? It's because they didn't want an honest representation of what was going on. They wanted to lie about Amos Miller like they've done for years. And so that process of doing things was not at all the correct constitutional process, not even consistent with search warrant standards in the state of Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. All right. So in your closing statements, you were petitioning the judge with the argument that.
So I think that's what he was saying there is very important. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. So the more people understand what's going on, the more likely the correct outcome will be. If people understand that there's issues with a certain agency in Oneida County that's kind of going off the rails, and there becomes a large public outcry, that agency is going to change. Because Oneida County is not a big county. It doesn't take a lot of people making a fuss and educating the public to make that change. And that's part of the reason why I'm doing this, is to raise a little bit of awareness to certain things that are going on, to help people understand. If you're ignorant of these things, that doesn't mean that they won't affect you in the future. So we all need to be a little bit more educated about what's going on.
That if the injunction was upheld, Miller would have no recourse once the case moved into trial. I didn't understand what this meant. Could you explain it a little bit further?
So the law exists that if you suffer monetary damages, for the most part, you're not allowed to collect those damages from the state governments. So you can bring federal civil rights claims. In some of those cases, the state governments can be required to pay. But as Amos Miller's part of the injunction case, if the judge ultimately rules in Amos's favor, Amos can't get back the economic loss that he's had to suffer this whole time.
Now, that would be something interesting to do, is to create a law that if you are found innocent of whatever you're being charged with, you will be compensated for the loss of time that you were able to, that you spent in court, for your court fees, your lawyer fees. If all of those things were returned back to you, then I would like that a lot more. That would be awesome. Because right now, you've got to, or you need to go to court to fight this, that, or the other. Like with Trump right now, he's gotten, I think, 94 different charges against him? Is he going to get any of the money that he spent returned to him if he's found innocent, if those cases are dismissed, or he gets a mistrial, or whatever else? I doubt it. I think he's basically feeding the families of all the lawyers that he's got for those cases, and he's got to pay. I don't know. I don't think he has to pay the court fees, but anyway, he's out millions upon millions upon millions of dollars for the lawfare that is being thrown against him. And what do the prosecutors have to worry about? They get a paycheck. They don't have to worry. They can charge him with all sorts of stuff, and whether he's innocent or not, it doesn't matter to them. Like Fannie Willis in the Georgia case, she's sleeping with the head prosecutor and going on cruises and having a great time with him. And is she going to suffer any repercussions for that? No, probably not. Except a little bit of a public shaming from the right side of the aisle. Beyond that, she's probably going to be fine. It's a bit ridiculous.
Because the state is considered immune from damage claims. And that's the problem. And that's why the courts generally say not to give an injunction in favor of the state unless it's undoubtable that they're going to prevail. And the judge never made that determination. He just thought that he had to rubber stamp whatever the state requested based on his interpretation of the permit laws.
Mm-hmm. So is Miller prepared to move into trial?
Yes. So people are keeping Amos afloat. There's a give, send, go that's for Amos Miller that's keeping him. Their goal was to bankrupt him so that he wouldn't be able to continue to contest the case. And they knew because he's Amish, he would never sue himself. So they figured he'll be out of money, he'll be out of resources, he'll be out of business. Even if he wins the case, his farm will be gone and done. They'd been internally joking for years in their emails about couldn't wait to see him in handcuffs, couldn't wait to see his farm forfeited and foreclosed upon. That's who these people are. They're the worst kind of regulatory bureaucrat. Think of the character from like the first Ghostbusters, who releases all the ghosts in the name of protecting the environment. It's that kind of personality, except nastier, meaner, and dumber. And so but because people have gone to the Give Son Go to support Amos Miller, I co-founded a legal organization called Free America Law Center. That's primarily right now about Amos Miller. People can support all the legal aspects of the case through that. And then Amos Miller Organic Farm still has a lot of products available that are not dairy products. And between those three, I think we can keep them alive to win this case.
Yeah. What are the next steps, and what does that timeline look like?
Well, on Monday, we filed our motion to stay.
Anyway, there's a little bit more going on there, but I think that is probably enough. There's another story out of Pennsylvania that's similar to this. 2 Pennsylvania men operating dairy reproduction service are in prison following a complaint of practicing veterinary medicine without a license. So what were they doing? They were running an ultrasound for pregnant cows. Do you need a veterinary license for that? If so, why? Again, if you're providing a service to someone and they're happy with that service, what are licenses for? To protect the individual, right? Well, if the individual understands that they are providing a service to you without a license, why does it matter? Anyway, Rusty Herb, 43, was booked into Lancaster County Prison on April 11th, while Ethan Wentworth, 33, was sent to the York County Prison on April 10th. Her and Wentworth are listed as operating partners in Airville-based No Bull Solutions. The pun. Veterinarians have made multiple complaints. Oh, so it's the veterinarians that are complaining, not the customers. Interesting. Multiple complaints about the illegal practice of veterinary medicine by unlicensed individuals employed by Noble Solutions. According to a complaint filed with the Department of State in 2020 by the Pennsylvania Veterinary Medicine Association, the complaint alleges that 2 people employed by Noble were doing ultrasounds and making diagnoses. The documents cited reports from veterinary association members and posts on Facebook. So I fix computers on the side every once in a while. If people need help with their computers, I fix them. People seem to be fine with that. Do I need a license to do that? In Idaho, no, not yet. But what if there was a technology repair license association or something like that in Idaho? All of a sudden, if they put a complaint against me of repairing a computer without a license, am I going to go to jail? I shouldn't, but whatever. In 2010, Her was ordered to pay $3,500, a $3,500 fine, and to cease and desist from the unlicensed practice of veterinary medicine. My wife, she said that a chick was sick and might need some Corid. Was she practicing veterinary medicine without a license? Uh-oh. Well, I guess there was no payment, so it was okay at that point. Wentworth got a cease and desist order in 2018, along with a $3,000 civil penalty. The 2020 complaint alleges that Her and Wentworth continued to practice the veterinary medicine without a license and hired others to do the same. According to dairy farmer Ben Macemore, who is acting as a spokesman for Her and Wentworth, both men were advised by former attorneys not to pay the fines or appear in court because they don't see an issue with using ultrasound for reproductive services such as pregnancy checks. He said they are each serving 30-day sentence without bail. Messmore, who is involved with Her and Wentworth in an unrelated business, said the law governing veterinary practice is vague and doesn't cover ultrasounding, which is a common practice on dairy farms today. I know of up to 20 individuals in the state using ultrasound for reproduction. Anyone can purchase one, as they are readily available today. So you can do your own ultrasound on animals just fine. But if you do someone else's, all of a sudden, it's a huge problem and you might have to go to jail. You see a problem with that? Numerous dairy farmers in Lancaster, Lebanon, York, and surrounding counties depend on the services offered by Noble, and the operators arrested has caused multiple problems for those farms, Messmore said. The Pennsylvania Veterinary Medicine Association deferred comment to the Department of State, which said it couldn't confirm or deny an investigation due to confidentiality statutes. So basically, that means it is happening, I'm assuming. A search of the Pennsylvania licensing system verification system didn't turn up any veterinary license records for Her or Wentworth. But again, should you need a license for running a piece of machinery like that? When I was a kid, my dad would preg check every fall. He didn't use an ultrasound. He just stuck his hand up there and felt if there was a calf. Should he have gone to jail for, well, that would be more sexual assault on a cow. I'm sure the cow didn't enjoy that. The department reviews every potential practice violation of which it becomes aware, whether that is through a complaint filed directly to the department or a notification from local law enforcement or through media reports. Spokeswoman Amy Gooley said in an email, if the State Board of Veterinary Medicine is going to interpret ultrasounding as practicing medicine, the law needs to be changed, Ms. Moore said. And I completely agree with that. If you're performing like difficult surgery on an animal and the consumer thinks that you have the expertise and you don't, I think the law should get involved in that. But if they understand that you're not a veterinarian, but you have years of experience handling this equipment, and you're doing something that's not invasive for the cattle or anything, you're just scanning the cow for a calf, why is the government involved? Unless you as the producer have done something to harm the consumer, the state should not be involved, in my opinion. This really affects every single one of us, dairy farmers. With the economic situation of Pennsylvania dairy, we need all the help we can get, Ms. Moore said. It's not easy out there, and people need to change the way that dairy in Pennsylvania is being treated. We're being tarred and feathered economically, and the burden keeps getting worse. A recording on the phone line listed for Noble Solutions said that due to the legal situation and staff shortages, the business is not scheduling herd checks or horse services before May 20th. The message urges callers to contact the state veterinary board and local lawmakers to express their concerns about the situation. A Noble Solution LLC defense fund has been set up at Give Send Go. That's the phone number. So it goes back to what I said previously. The more regulations, the more red tape that is there, that is not helping protect the consumer, the more often it will stifle growth and prevent other people from jumping in and driving down costs through competition and encouraging other people to become entrepreneurs. How many people are, when I was a kid, I think there were 4 dairy farms in Malad, and now I think there is one person milking goats and one person milking like 3 cows. And if tragedy struck and the supermarket couldn't get milk anymore, there would not be enough milk produced in the valley for all of the consumers in the valley. And how many other food products are like that? Do we have an orchard here in Malad? I don't think so. Do the beef farmers, the beef ranchers of Malad sell to Malad? No, not, I would say not very often, because 1, the consumers of Malad go to the store for their beef, and 2, the producers of Malad, they can't get the consumers to buy a whole beef or a quarter beef or whatever, and you can't get specific cuts, because if you do, then you have to go to an USDA inspected butcher service for those cuts to be cut up. You can't go to a custom butcher shop because they're not USDA inspected, and that inspection is what saves us from all dying, I guess. So that's one thing, and there was one other thing I wanted to share. It's not just in Pennsylvania that's having issues. The Michigan Department of Agriculture has seized $90,000 worth of raw dairy from Nourishing Co-op there in Michigan. And here's a video of them chucking all of those dairy products in the garbage because the Michigan Department of Agriculture said it's bad. So if it's happening in Pennsylvania and it's happening in Michigan, when is it going to start happening in Idaho? Unless Idaho takes a stand and makes sure that we have food safety, we're going to have something like this sometime in the near future. One thing that is a good thing to know is that Thomas Massie did introduce the Prime Act into Congress, and let me pull that up. Let me share that. All right, the Prime Act is the Processing Revival and Interstate Meat Exemption Act. Is a legislation introduced in the United States to give states more control over meat processing regulations. So this is specific to limiting federal agencies from screwing with the farmers. This would not save Amos Miller because it's the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture that's trying to shut him down. But this would help limit the amount of federal intrusion into individual family farms. So that would be beneficial. Anyway, this is running long. I'm upset about Amos Miller's struggles, and I hope the best for him. If you want to support him, please go to Amos Miller. What's the Amos Miller Organic Farms, I think is what it's called. You can Google that. And Robert Barnes is a great guy to follow. You can find him and his cohort Viva Fry on Rumble and YouTube. They're really interesting to listen to find out what's happening in the legal world and to get his take on what's going on. And you can just follow me. That's also a good thing. I'm trying to provide a service to Oneida County and anyone else that wants to hear about news that I find interesting. Please like, share, subscribe, do all those things. And if you want to leave a comment down below, that would be awesome too. And I'll see you on the next one.